Good afternoon and Happy New Year. My name is Bahman Yazdanfar and this is TurnAround, a program that my colleague John Hardy and I bring to you as on a weekly basis as long as we can to discuss different aspects of the environment that we live in or work in from different perspectives. As we know, there are a number of the factors involved in our relationships, whether it is at a work situation or if it is in a organization or in a governmental agency and so on. Today we have discussed last year a number of the issues like a whistleblower. We discussed art of the communication. We discussed the different aspects of the economy. We discussed the different type of the people that run an institution or organization for that matter. And today we are looking at a different angle. We have a guest today. John Stewart is with us to discuss with you and us the different angle of this human interaction. Thank you very much, John, and thank you for accepting our invitation. For our viewers who haven't seen your own program, can you just briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, well, thank you, Bahman, and thank you, John.
Oh, pleasure to have you.
John and I have known each other for several years, where we were participants in the famous Sandale Circle.
That's right, or infamous, but
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
In some
There were many
circles.
discussions like this. We had a smorgasbord of experiences. We would have,
Yes.
we'd feed the mind with a discussion of like this for an hour, and then we would eat. We might dance, and then we had meditation.
So it's like African kind of the
We tried to have a total nourishing human experience so that we all nourished one another in that context of play in the spirit of the true meaning of the word symposium. If you look it up in the dictionary, it has a different meaning than one typically thinks. Symposium means drinking, dancing, merriment, discussion, like the ancient Greeks used to do. So I think that's an important way that we learn to nourish each other in today's world. But you asked me about my own show. It's called Divine Physics, because my background is quantum biophysics and medical sciences. So I'm interested in new ways of healing both the mind, the heart, and the soul. And I'm very interested in psychotronics, which is the influence of higher dimensions on our existence, physically and mentally, emotionally. Yeah.
And how, for an average Joe like myself, how these things plays role in our daily life?
Well, we are subjected to the influences of the universe that impress upon us. Some we can see, most we don't see and feel, but yet we're affected by these. From things like the most subtle and long-term, like evolution, brought us here. But evolution was influenced by these psychotronic forces that Rupert Sheldrake calls morphic fields, Jung called archetypes. So we are subjected to all of these influences. So it's important that we know what's influencing us. It's important that we knew where were we before we were born.
So is there a kind
Actually,
of the
let's
life
explore that.
in the afterlife kind of the thing? It is
Exactly.
So where were we?
Folk, where were we? Did we come with tabula rasa, a clean slate? Obviously not. The evidence is overwhelming now after almost 100 years of research, like Dr. Stevenson's book on reincarnation. There's scientific evidence that we had multiple existences, lifetimes physically and non-physically. So we bring with us this residue, we bring with us a history, sometimes called karma, where we have rebalancing our debts to pay back. Those who harm today will be harmed in the next life. So I think that people who are doing terrorist acts today will find themselves subjected and be the recipients and victims of exactly the same atrocities. They're only bringing it upon themselves.
But is this retribution, or is it a kind of balancing, a kind of re-education, in the sense that there's a sort of I guess all of us have only a partial knowledge, We only have our limited perspective when we're on this plane, right? The subjective perspective.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, we actually have to make mistakes because we don't see the whole picture.
We're here to make mistakes,
Right,
really,
so-
and to learn,
Exactly.
and not to keep doing them. Yeah.
Right, but let's just say, so then we get into the question, okay, okay, you get the terrorist. He does something like that. But at the same time, in his micro world, he might come from an environment which is completely reinforced the notion in his head that what he's doing is in fact, if he were not to do it, it would be immoral, right?
That's right, yeah.
So then, for instance, in that case,
Well,
what is
they're
the
deeply,
cost?
They're deeply sucked in to
Oh, absolutely.
the negativity of the culture. However, superimposed on that are the archetypes of goodness and kindness and generosity that will either now or in multiple lifetimes they'll suddenly realize they shouldn't be doing that anymore, and that those prevailing loving fields will inevitably affect them. Maybe not now, maybe not for 10 lifetimes, because they're so embedded
So
in that negativity.
densely in
It may take them 10 lifetimes to slowly allow the loving fields to influence them.
John, in a Hindu, in one of the faction of the Hinduism, they have a belief system that you reincarnated over and over again to the point that you do good deed, and after that you perish forever or go to heaven or whatever. But what you are telling me is very similar to that. That means if I come to this lifetime, it is not my first time I am in this lifetime, and it won't be my last time.
No.
And until to the point that I realize that the deeds or the intention of what I do is just and fair. What's happened after that?
Well,
If I get to that point that I
you
do
realize
no harm, I realize
Realize it,
everything,
yeah.
do I come back again?
you may choose for a different purpose. So you may have worked out all your karma and you're clean, but you may still, entities still choose to come back. If you read some of Dolores Cannon's work on people who have had previous lifetimes, some of them come back as teachers, as healers.
So in service.
To help humanity, because humanity is in a bad way right now. It's a crisis. So there are many higher loving beings, some of whom have never had a physical lifetime, are coming in right now. And it's interesting, many of these higher beings who've never are unprepared for the ugliness and the challenges. And many suicidal people are high level beings who can't handle it. They underestimated the difficulty of living in this world.
But then, okay, but begs the question, they're higher beings, they come here. And it's counterintuitive that a higher being would come down here and not be able to handle it, right? So what is it that actually takes place once this higher being is born that kind of almost partially incapacitates them? And then the next question is, what is the point for them of going through this? Why are they here?
Love. They love us. We are their brothers, and we are them.
But is this part of their development too, on a still higher level?
It must be. Yes, it must be. But it may be not so selfish. It may be total. They're at a level of total altruism and generosity, that they are not concerned about themselves. We are a part of their body. We're all part of the same body. And therefore, it's like the right hand helping the left hand. If you have a scar, then the right hand comes and stitches up the wound. So it's just the right hand helping the left hand. We are the left hand. They are the right hand.
Except that the left hand doesn't know.
What right hand does.
Yes,
But let me ask you, you just mentioned a very interesting point. You said those who achieved to that level may choose to come again. Is it the matter of choice, or is it the matter of obligation? How come if that person has the choice, but the other person who has done the bad deed is being forced to come? Or does that person has a choice again?
The bad one is stuck.
It seems from what I read in the literature, Edgar Cayce, Dolores Cannon, Brian Weiss, all of these sources all say the same thing. The fundamental law in the universe, the prime directive is freedom of choice. They cannot interfere. So when they come, they are like us. They go through the veil of forgetfulness, and they don't remember who they are. But yet they have that innate capacity to be great leaders, like Mother Teresa's, for example. Why did she come?
Let's say if we talk about, go one step higher, let's say Buddha or Christ, right? What would, or I guess the Atman, what would they have come in with? I mean, obviously they're higher beings. Would they have had, are there examples where it's an exception, where they actually are aware
Of who
they are throughout?
Very few.
I mean, obviously few, but would that be, let's say, true in the
like
case
John of God knows,
yeah,
to a great extent who he is, and he has chosen to generously give of his time, and the spirit of healing flows through him. John of God's a good example.
Yeah. And is there any way, any form, any method that an individual can see whether he or she has in herself or himself?
No, the motives are very subtle. Even the people who come as clients to regression therapists don't know why they've come. They feel an impulse. Oh yeah, there's an influence telling them to go. And then in that process they discover a lot of things about themselves. In fact, I frankly think that the next level for us humans is to discover who we are. And maybe we all should go through regression. And me too. We all should go find out what we have been, why we're doing the things we're doing, and we get a bigger picture of our true identity.
But is there another way through the veil, in the sense that
yes, yours.
Is it still working? I guess I should put this back on.
We're not allowed to know who we are. We're dumbed down.
And how one person can go and find out? You can, I mean, let's say if I go, someone who claims to be expert as a psychic healer, or I'm not talking about every psychic healer, someone who is really being proven. Is that person is able to find out where I come from, or is it, if it is that easy for one person, why is not easy for the rest to do, to find out by themselves?
That's a strange phenomenon, that there are some very rare people like the Edgar Cayces and other people that I'm reading about right now in this book I want to talk about in my next show, Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain. How at the time of Stalin, he swept all the scientists into Siberia, to a city, a science city, and there they did their psychic work and discovered there were people who had the psychic ability, telepathy, etc., clairvoyance, telekinesis, and there are a few rare supernormal people who have that ability, and we should be going to them, but maybe we should be looking within ourselves and helping each other. Each of us should learn how to support each other in regression to past life.
That is my point. I mean, first of all, recognizing who is genuine, who is authentic, in those ability, first of all, is by itself is a task of Hercules. I mean, if so many of them see your fortune teller for $10 or something, then you have a mix.
Normally, you have to pay at least 25.
To 25, but in the youngest read you can go for 10, just reading palms. But the point is there any way that our intuition, if we trust our own intuition and just communicate with each other or share our intuitions with each other, is it a way to at least a pathway or gateway to some understanding?
Yeah, I think that humanity is evolving, obviously, and I think the next main level, the leap, will be to more telepathy. There are people who have been who definitely have telepathic ability. It's the science is overwhelming. But maybe we can all become more and more telepathic, and then there would be no crime. Everyone would know who did it.
Well, then we have to close the police department, and that is a little bit.
We wouldn't need police anymore. We wouldn't need the military
they
anymore.
would be very upset if.
That's right. That's why we're going to have to hold off on that for now. I'll put the brakes on. But but is this the only way through? Like, in the sense that, do we have to go? Because is it? I mean, the way I picture it, it's as if we are sort of in this frequency in a band, right? And we're held in this band by all these various forces. And that enlightenment is on the other side of this band. It's breaking free of this frequency. But, okay, one way intuitively is to go through regression, through some sort of regression to where, see from whence we came. But is there another way, in the sense that if we are essentially in this bubble, like the Truman Show, where our lives are that, maybe we're actually incredibly close to the door, each one of us, regardless of what our awareness is. And one of the things that I've been toying with is the idea that, what if, how the cleverness of the game is to hide something in plain sight, which is misdirection. Because that's the only way you can explain
like
why
magician,
things are never found.
Illusionist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, just by accident, people would find it. But when you misdirect, then you can make it sure that they don't find it. Now, in the case of enlightenment, right, that when we actually come to that sort of paradox, to that wall, where sort of we just can't figure it out, like the koan in Zen Buddhism, the paradox, the places in our lives that just don't make sense, where you're at the point where you think you're going to go insane, or you just want to jump out of your skin, right? Probably the point at which the higher spirits also kind of just check out. At that point, what do we try to do? We try to get away from the pain. And what do? We actually try to make sense out of it, right? We look for a reason, we look for explanation. Justification, right? But what if we actually ignored all of that and did the opposite and simply said, look, the whole purpose of actually all these events was to create this moment, this pain, and therefore the why is completely a misdirection. At this point, all it is to go directly into that pain. Drill right into it, which is exactly the last place that any of us are inclined to go. And so maybe each one of us, rather especially the people at the bottom, the people who are the players not, because they're nicely insulated, but all those people who are in the squeeze, who are suffering, in some sense, are they not actually being pushed to the doorway, should they choose to actually, turn and actually go through it? I've said a lot, but what do you think of that?
Well, there's a famous phrase, resistance causes persistence. So what you're saying is the more you resist what you have to face, the more it comes up in your face.
But you just keep looping back and looping back. And that the entire sort of intellectual process is absolutely not the way through.
It's not the answer.
No, because but isn't the way we think of regression in some ways the same problem, because we're looking at it saying, oh, well, here's a sequence of events which have led us here. Whereas what we're talking about when we're coming to consciousness is a complete paradigm shift. There isn't a logical sequence of that will take us through. Because if there was, not everybody would be going through.
Let me
ask
you, John, something following what the other John says. Let me ask you to just clarify that, because it's one of those things that I have been struggling with that for many, many decades. Every human being goes through what just John described. Comes to a point to his or her life that there is something that is insists on giving the pain to that person, and if, as you call it, if resistant causes persistent, if they resist it, if they go through that adversity, they maybe discover something, maybe not. However, most of the human that I have met or have heard in the whole globe, in all of my almost 60 years of my life, always try to choose run away or chooses easy way out. Therefore, they don't want to face it. Even if they have a headache, instead of finding what is the reason for headache, why not get an aspirin? Why not get an Advil right away? Before you find maybe you have a blood pressure.
And that's why they sell us the aspirin.
So I am asking you, because
Exactly.
you are in this field,
Yeah.
why
That's a
the
good question.
human nature chooses the easy way out rather than discovery of self or self-discovery, at least.
But we're looking at it from this 3D level rather than a higher, looking down from an orbital view. We can only mostly see it from this level.
From the playing field.
At this flat Earth level. Yeah.
Well, it
But
is
if-
our ability. We can't just
but,
really.
but we do have the ability to rise above it, is a nice phrase. And that's the only way. Rise above it to a higher level, and you begin to see that there's a purpose in what's happening. You don't have to embrace it, and you can say, I decide to navigate around this problem right now. Or you might decide, I'm going to embrace it and burn through it and experience it fully. And then it'll be clear I won't carry it as karma into my next lifetime.
Rise above to see yourself, or
but-
rise above to see the others.
But your
Everything,
point,
everything,
to,
yeah.
to your point, John, exactly, like even the decision to even engage with it in that way requires a high perspective view. Because if you're just on the level of the, you know what this reminds me of? There was I think the fellow's name is Carlyle, a thinker, and he was talking about human consciousness, and he was dividing it, and he did some studies with rats or mice in a maze, a labyrinth. And so what happened was, there was the first level of consciousness was the mouse was just going back and forth on the same track, more or less just back and forth, back and forth. Next level was that they actually started to figure out, certain tracks that didn't work. Then they're experimenting, but again, now we're on the horizontal plane, right?
Yeah.
And then there was a third level of consciousness which would happen, and this actually happened with mice, where some of these mice would get up on their hind legs and look down over the maze. Now what's interesting
To evaluate the-
exactly. And so what's very interesting about this is that something like 1 or 2% of mice did this. But it's no less true of human beings. I mean, how many human beings actually are inclined to do this?
Yeah.
And the question then is, why were we designed this way? Because this is obviously part of our design, not to look at it for the most part.
Bring up the next level beyond that.
Yeah.
You know what that is? The 100th monkey phenomenon.
Yeah, but then how do you connect that?
See, once the animal, the mouse or the monkey makes
entire
that
consciousness
realization,
shifts.
it transmits to other monkeys and rats all over the universe.
But has that been true of human beings? Like, for instance, we've had enlightened beings.
Can you hold your thought?
That's the 100th
Are
monkey
you
for me.
suggesting
Yeah.
that it comes time, not necessarily
Yeah.
in our lifetime, but there will be a time that just a small portion, very minuscule
Yeah.
portion of the society, after learning all of that knowledge, will be able to transmit to all others who then what is the purpose of life? The lazy ones get the free information.
They might as well enjoy themselves and figure, you know what?
Then maybe that is the reason they are lazy.
They should be optimists and figure, hopefully someone's going to figure this out. 'Cause
No,
it ain't me.
they're digging a deeper hole if their purpose is pure selfishness. They're digging a deeper hole for themselves.
But based on what you
No, but
just said,
basically
if it is
they're all coming up anyways.
Someone comes and
Enlightens them and rescues them, as it
Yeah.
were. Yeah.
So if I know that I am being rescued, what is the point of being trying?
You don't know. They don't know. They're
But then
being
what's the
rescued.
point?
Don't
And
know.
also,
Okay.
what's the point of rescue? Because then you're, in a sense, cheating that individual of the experience. That doesn't,
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
But it's still balanced by their freedom of choice. They can continue to be
difficult, not to accept
be
it,
jerks
okay, yeah.
and be destructive. They have the choice, or they can say no. There's a better path. There's a better choice. I'm going to be kind and generous instead of.
So
a
it's
It's
murderer.
like our electoral process when it
Yeah.
comes to the
I
whole
think
world.
it's an A or B situation, because you're drawn towards the crime or the sin,
Yeah.
but at the same time there's a higher call, and then it's like a choice between two,
Well,
good
yeah.
or evil, right?
It is, but that's just actually examining good and evil, right? I mean, one of the things I guess that evil has over good is that it's immediate, it's visceral. You know, the payoffs are fast. You know, I'm going to.
And attraction is high.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
And opportunity plenty.
And not only that, you're rewarded for it. You're applauded for it. I mean, everything around you, basically on this plane, supports it. So essentially, you have to go completely against the grain.
Yes.
And then, the other question is this there in everyone? Like, in other words, are there people who are born without this, or are there individuals who just lose this very quickly so that most of their lives, they just can't access it? I've always wondered about that.
Yeah, I think the answer is in the readings I've done, that lifetime after lifetime, some people have gone down and down and down.
Yeah.
And in this lifetime, they commit the most heinous of crimes because it's consistent with their previous lifetimes. They've just
so it's not necessarily every life is better than the previous one. It could be
no,
worse.
It's
than,
worse.
Okay.
Could be worse.
They
have gone deeper and deeper and deeper.
And then what's going to happen to them? Like, eventually, where do they go? Like, can they drop off, or where do they go from there?
They keep doing it and doing it.
They turn into slugs?
Eventually, the light of good, the light begins to. That they get maybe they get bored with it, maybe they get tired with it, maybe they have a realization that this isn't getting me anywhere.
Or they're compressed sufficiently.
I don't know
they
the
reach
answer
a certain
to that, but
point
I
where
think
it's just
this is
so
how
horrible that it breaks.
Let me put it from
They're
different.
disgusted with themselves,
Yeah.
maybe. Disgust kicks in.
Guilt.
That even exists when you take a look at an alcoholic's life or something like that,
Or
where they
even
reach,
criminal,
they
or a
descend,
criminal,
they descend, and they descend to a certain point where they just, it's like either kill myself or somehow change, because you
That
can't
brings
go
up
on
a
like
point
this.
on my list of topics
Yes.
that I suggested is the effect of testosterone.
Oh yes, sex, alpha males, and testosterone.
Interestingly, right? Now,
How you connect that to this?
this is important because there are different males and different females.
Yeah.
There are in every species, the animals,
Or the
the
alphas.
lions, the tigers, you name it, the wolves. There's the alpha male.
Okay.
And then we have that in humans
Okay.
too. So alpha males have to be alpha. They think alpha, they behave alpha, but that's their normal healthy
Is it in a
function.
good alpha or is a bad
well,
alpha?
there you are.
Is that a
Yeah.
low vibration?
It's often testosterone driven.
Okay, true, but they were also given that. They were brought here in that. So when you take a look at someone like that, especially since so many of the criminals are that,
Yeah.
are those, is that consistent with a lower vibration, the higher testosterone?
No, it's just more energy. That can be. It's like energy can be channeled to good or evil. They can become. They could.
How many monks
Their
have high
drive
testosterone?
could make them an Olympic athlete. They need a lot of testosterone to be an Olympic athlete, right?
Oh, I see. So if it's not properly directed,
If it's not properly
then
channeled
will-
directly.
So it is like that's old saying that we have a vicious animal, a bad dog and good dog within us.
Even-
It depends who do you feed,
even to
feed
become
it,
pope,
kind of thing.
Maybe you need a lot of testosterone to be pope, but
but
it's
not too much, because otherwise you could have a problem once you got
What is
there.
that? You can
Yeah,
have a lot of
or a
this-
leader, a prime minister.
highly
or-
Oh no,
sex
no!
pope.
That is why I said that. I mean, if you go to the head of a mafia, they are alpha type.
all
They're
alpha
all
types, yeah.
alpha types.
Yeah.
If you
They're
go
not gonna last if they're
to
not,
some
yeah.
of the leaders or not necessarily leaders, but presidents of political parties, leaders usually
Yeah.
they
And
are
like Bill
not.
Clinton is an alpha male and behaves as a healthy, most of the time as a healthy alpha male. And how healthy alpha males have problems in our society because they want to do things. They have difficulty with monogamy, for example. But so it's toxic for them to be in a monogamous relationship. That's why so many men throughout history have had harems and multiple wives.
But
and things.
males are not innately monogamous. I mean,
No, you
per
can
se.
find women.
I mean, it's
but,
just
but
that
again,
men
it
who
could be
have
the,
money
the
are
amount
not
of
monogamous.
testosterone.
But there are
on
some
them.
men
Yeah.
who are not alpha males who do make good husbands and fathers.
In other words,
so it's
you're telling.
catchy.
So in other words,
John,
Hitting a sore
John,
point.
is-
in other words, any intelligent woman should just run from like hell from the alpha male.
But intelligent alpha women are only attracted to alpha males.
John,
and that's the curse.
Look at-
That's what
O.J.
makes them so
O.J.
miserable.
Simpson's wife.
Yes, exactly. It's true.
She is a beautiful blonde woman who should never have been attracted to an outrageous alpha male like him.
But
but
that's-
she had
okay,
this fatal
Okay,
attraction.
Yeah, that's
John,
the
let me
natural,
ask you
yeah.
something. Assume
That's interesting,
assume
yeah.
what you said is correct. But if there is a attract, by the way, every woman or every man usually attracted to a opposite, if it is
yeah,
opposite
opposites
sex.
attract,
I
yeah.
am not talking about homosexual, but in opposite sex, they are attracted to someone powerful.
Yes.
Someone that exudes
it's
that
an
kind of
aphrodisiac. It's an
that
aphrodisiac.
confidence. But what you said is, if you are not alpha, it makes you good husband and or good wife or whatever.
You're useless to be anything else.
So you put everybody in a very, very sensitive situation,
Yeah.
because in one hand they want to be alpha type, and in other hand they want to be a good provider for their family. So if I want to be a good provider, I should denounce the alpha type mentality.
Well, let me tell you, the birds have a good system.
Yeah.
The female bird mates with the alpha male because of the genes, but but brings up the little children, the birds, with a non-alpha male. Many
Like
female
a beehive. Beehive is the
beehive,
same.
many
the same
female
thing.
animals
Drone, so
are
they become the
polygamous.
drones.
Polygamous,
Yeah, beehive. The queen
Polyandrous.
does that with
Yeah,
the.
but isn't that true of the lions and everything like that? It's only the top ones who mate.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Of
and
a lot
then-
of a lot of
and-
species,
and
it's
then
only
the rest.
because that's what basically preserves
It's
strong gene pool,
essential for
etc.
the race. Essential for the race.
Is
the
it
gene pool.
directly? I mean, clinically, is it related to amount of testosterone, or is it just testosterone being used as a form of the barometer for the?
That's just my theory, that it's
Yeah.
testosterone based in men, and then it's maybe estrogen based in
Yes,
women. So
progesterone
there's an
in the woman, yeah,
analogous
yeah.
alpha female that's more estrogen based.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the purpose for the female to be alpha? Like for the male, it's that.
It's
So
not alpha, but it's the
what is
the inverse of alpha.
It is the
no,
higher
it's the
rate
reciprocal.
of
Except that
hormone.
but in the case, but here I'm just thinking from the genetic point of view, because okay, in the case of the alpha male, he's the only one who's allowed to mate, right? But in the case of the females, they don't have it that the female is the only way. In other words, the alpha male doesn't just impregnate the alpha female. He's basically,
production, reproduction of the alpha type,
spreading the wealth
yeah.
throughout,
yes,
right?
alpha type
the
son.
sperm.
Exactly.
In
So then,
horses,
then
yeah.
what is the point then of the? In other words, is there such a thing as an alpha female then?
There's an equivalent.
And what is the genetic
O.J.
purpose of
Simpson's
it?
wife is a good example of that opposite. Opposites attract.
But why have
yeah.
them? In other words, like what is, because from a genetic point of view, it is adaptive to have alpha males, right? In strength of species going forward.
Yeah.
But what is the adaptive quality of the alpha female?
Maybe it's just genetic. She has a genetic
Of course, men shouldn't be here deciding this, but
composition that there's there's like matter, antimatter, that destroys both of them.
Oh, you know what it is too? It's otherwise. The only person who will take down, it's funny, this comes from, I remember reading about Chinese history about these emperors.
Yeah.
And it was in the 36 Strategies, which is the ultimate book of dirty tricks, of all time in terms of what
Well,
these
they have
emperors
the
were up to,
oldest
etc. Right?
ancient history.
Exactly. And the interesting thing, they were talking about these emperors who are, just the most vicious killers. They were wiping out millions even back in the old days, happily. And these individuals were only afraid of one person in their entire universe,
And the queen
and that
was-
was their wife.
Yes,
They were
yes.
terrified of it. So I was thinking maybe the purpose of the alpha female is to actually teach misery to the alpha male.
Either
In other words,
that,
keep
or
them-
a lot of males, they have alpha females that make them a leader in their industry. Like there is a woman behind every successful man, kind of the.
No, Those are typically not alpha males, though. Those are
No, they are not alpha male. They are. I mean, there are alpha
but I was thinking
female
in-
that make them to
But in the
project
case of the
themselves.
alpha female, what it can also be is, otherwise, maybe that's the only thing. But no, I'm just thinking about this. Like you think about like Ivan the Terrible. And the story of Ivan the Terrible was that, he was a pretty aggressive maniac to start with. His whole family was killed by the boyars, etc. And so he grew up in that sort of environment. But then what happened was his wife was some kind of almost angelic creature who was extremely good and kind, and somehow that kept it in check.
Yeah,
But then when
yeah,
the wife
yeah,
died,
yeah.
then he just went berserk, right?
That could be it. It's the
So, and she wasn't an alpha, and yet it was interestingly, it was the opposite of an alpha, and a higher being that could keep the alpha in check.
it's like particle, antiparticle.
Yes.
And they can't come too close, otherwise they'll annihilate each other. So
And that's it.
Like
So-
a positive.
positive and negative battery on a car battery.
Whereas
for
if you
example, yeah.
whereas if you think about the alpha male and the alpha female, right? That's the Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah.
The natural born killers. The thing about that is even in psychology you have antisocial personality disorder, which is more characteristic among males, and then you have borderline, which is characteristic among females,
Right.
and very often those two combine, right?
That's right.
Well,
yeah.
But I mean, but it's a combination from hell. It's like Ferdinand and Isabella, like
here
just
you
a
said
mess.
Clinton, Hillary, and William.
Oh, yeah, the
yes,
two of
it
them.
is a good example
There's a
of
perfect
the
example.
power couple that
Yeah.
no matter what they do, they always be there with each other. They help each other, and they take turn in the politics to get in the higher power as much as they
Absolutely
can.
true. But is this what is the benefit of this? I mean, it's
For-
almost like a
for
force
them?
this is like a force of evil. I mean, this
For
is-
us, for the public, but not for them.
no, okay, for them. But we're talking about for humanity as a whole.
But I think the universe,
Yeah.
evolution craves power.
How so?
Drive it
How
forward?
So? How so? That is very
Was a
good.
motive force?
That is very good.
I think I just
Yeah.
suddenly got that. That's
No,
an
why?
archetype of power that the universe wants to see power and power.
And
The
concentrate
height
it?
of power is the right man and the right woman together.
No, I understand that, but what it's very a strong statement. If universe needs power, doesn't it contradict the freedom of the choice?
No, not in itself, because I think what you need is
Because if you have
need a
power,
different-
usually you have
No,
power
but
over other people's
no, but
choice.
isn't it like this though? You need a differential, in the sense that if you had power evenly distributed, you would have just this sort of even mass.
That's right,
But
it
it's the
wouldn't work,
differential
yeah.
in power.
Yeah.
It's just like sexual tension, right? What is it that makes a man and a woman attracted? Is differences. If men and women started to become too similar, which is a problem today, then really, what is that power of attraction? It disappears. So it's the
You know
reconciliation.
the famous
of this
saying,
difference.
behind every great
Yeah.
man there's a great woman.
Yes.
So I think that's the same
The-
phenomenon we're talking about.
Yes, what I'm saying is why the power? You said universe needs power. And then I look at the other phrase that we stated earlier, that the bottom line is we have a free will and freedom of choice. If there is a power,
Yeah.
usually, based on my experience and based on what I've read, is it comes at the cost of other people's freedom of choice.
See, that's a 3D way of looking at it.
Okay.
To rise above it, you'll see that we need those people to commit crimes against us,
To illuminate
to
us.
engage us in the choice to be angry or not angry, to forgive or not forgive.
to create the pressure, the tension.
Yeah.
a
right,
a
that's
form
right.
of the
Tension.
it's
As
like
if everybody's
understanding.
nice in a commune, then really, where's good and where's
Like-
evil?
like
right?
the Nazis, all the atrocities of the Nazis.
Yeah.
Like we needed them, they were needed in order to give humanity a choice to forgive or not forgive.
Like a cleansing.
And if we disregard all of the religions, all of the dogma, all of the philosophies, and let's focus on the energy of universe, if there is such a thing, again, my mind is very small, I cannot comprehend that. That is why I use the word if that such a thing exists. So all of this killing in the history of, let's say, in last 3,500, from Babylonian to the Romans to the Saxons to the English and all the way to the modern time, is needed for humanity to go through?
Well, yes and no. I think it's part of the answer, but it's more complex than to say that's the only explanation. There are these other explanations where these people, they're building karma, they have to pay a price because they are, from their perspective, they are committing crime and evil. They are,
From their perspective, maybe they are
From their-
doing good. From us, we see it as
for us, it's an opportunity to grow through our suffering, and for them, it's they will have to pay the price, even
Somehow.
though at a higher level there's a higher purpose. Nevertheless, they will still have to pay a price as being part of that. The Nazis will have to pay a price in their next lifetimes.
Tell me though, let's just say, if we're taking a look at the perpetrator, right? It's easy to see that the perpetrator of the crime will have to come back as a victim. Okay, that's easy. But now, let's take a look at maybe the victim too. Maybe the victim also has an issue because they have a problem in terms of
In the
resentment
past?
and all kinds of emotions related to how they played the part of the victim. So I guess in some ways that they have to come back as a perpetrator and an experience. Or I'm just wondering whether it would be, it wouldn't be exactly the same.
They have a
yeah?
lesson to learn of forgiveness,
Right.
notwithstanding their pain and suffering. They have to let it go. That's what forgiveness is, giving up an attachment to it.
No, correct. But let's just say they don't get that lesson. Let's just say they failed at that lesson, which
Yeah,
most victims fail, right? I mean, most of us fail.
Most of us,
right?
you know,
So let's just say,
I am guilty as charged.
here you are, being executed by the guillotine, and you're just not feeling particularly forgiving to those around you who are happily, jeering and laughing at you.
Right.
So you go out with a, let's just say, less than good, views, and feelings towards humanity. Okay, so you take this with you. Now, this is some kind of karma that you have. Like, how would that be worked out? In what, how would that karma be worked out? Let's say.
Let me give you another good example of people who went through that with that highest state of consciousness.
Yeah.
With the Christian martyrs, for example, who were
Exactly.
eaten by the lions in the forum. They went knowing that they went with an attitude of mind of the highest level.
Or the Cathars are an example of that, who went into the fire singing. But no, exactly. Those are the people who are evolved. But the ones who are not, what happens to them?
They'll have to come back and learn to that same
And how
lesson.
would they? I'm just wondering.
Victims,
they're going to keep coming back as victim until they get it right.
Until they get it right, yeah. And they stop being a victim anymore, yeah.
John, it's very interesting.
Interesting,
Just
yeah.
a few days ago, someone called me. We were talking about a medical thing. Apparently, she went to a doctor and she said something about her condition, and she told me something that was very funny hearing it from a doctor. Apparently, the doctor told her that it is in your gene and it comes back from your ancestors. You cannot help it.
Really? Oh, it's in your genes. Well, yeah, okay.
Gene,
from a genetic point of view, a doctor will say
but
this.
it was very simple problem. I think it's blood pressure or something like that. But the way that doctor described it is just came to my mind because what you said, that these people are coming back and back and back. Does it mean that we carry on a lot, all or large portion of the attributes of our past life, if there is such a thing?
Well, people come
Physically and mentally.
We come in with abilities that we picked up from past lives, like great savant children who can play Beethoven. They've never heard it before.
At 4 years old or whatever.
They're all on YouTube. More and more of these children. I just watched a lecture on quantum physics last week given by a 12-year-old.
Wow.
12-year-old boy who's now a professor of quantum physics at the Perimeter Institute in Waterloo, and he's only 17. So there are people like that. And where did they get that knowledge they never learned in this lifetime?
There was a study. I'm glad that you brought that example. There was a study that let's say they studied like a Tiger Woods or anyone like that they were prodigy in their field, either whether the piano player or the golf player or the this gentleman that you mentioned. These people, they give the credit to their ability, not only a little bit they are more advanced, but to number of the hours they spend. So if the parent put the kids from age of 3 to learn quantum physics, by the age of 12, is no wonder that he is.
But most children couldn't tolerate it. Like
I understand that, but as I said, there is an exceptional ability for that as in the part of child that is continue to do that.
No, right. But what I'm saying is, it's like the only way, when you think about it, let's say you look at Michael Jordan, you look at Gretzky, right? Like in terms of this mindless practice that they're doing, like I think there were two
and
rules
they
in the
do
net,
it
right?
over and over and over again.
Unless you have some sort of drive towards that, you just simply would go berserk. Like there's no way that the parent, no matter how much they wanted it, could actually force that unless it was was not built in, and
was
so that
innate,
it was not exactly innate.
Oh, I
And so-
agree. I agree.
So what happens
there
then
is something built in,
exactly.
but whether or not that being
Well, that helps. So, like Mozart.
cultured,
Mozart,
that come
Oh
up.
no, no, absolutely. Like for instance, but I guess also too that then the synchronicity is that Mozart was not born in the middle of Borneo.
Yeah.
He was born in Salzburg or wherever he was born,
Yeah,
but
and
in fact,
poor.
in Salzburg, in a place, to a father, etc., etc. So in other words, all those things were obviously part of the set in order to generate that result. And would that be true of all of us in the same way?
Yes. Yeah.
In that sense, so that
Like we all bring
Yeah.
in attributes and abilities and skills and knowledge and wisdom that we a heritage of past maybe millions of lifetimes.
But we are not aware of those abilities.
We're not consciously aware.
And how and why not everyone can cultivate that kind of the ability, and why just few will be
Again,
will
it's
do
freedom of choice, and people get distracted. Children get and they get suppressed by society, and they're taught at school. They're taught mathematics the way school teaches mathematics, for
Exactly.
example, and it
So
kills their
if we
creativity.
let children free
Like
will
this-
have a
This
free will.
12-year-old boy. It's interesting. You should really watch it on YouTube. I forget his name now, but when they took him out of school for 2 years, he blossomed in his own way, and he started writing equations that he never learned anywhere. Or Ramanujan, the famous mathematician, the young boy,
Who was discovered by
Jeremy
the-
Irons
yeah.
did a movie on him
Yes.
2 months ago. TIFF, the film festival, on the one of the most outstanding mathematicians in history was Ramanujan.
Or Stephen Hawking is another one.
Yeah.
The
So
parallels.
and then
yeah.
they don't need the help. They've got it already, and it certainly it help. Like in Mozart, they can refine it more.
Actually, it's a very good point. It's a good segue. I always, although I spent about more than 20 years in the educational institutions, and I call them institution in a very
pejorative way. Yeah.
in institutions, I personally very opposed to any form of the systemic teachings when it comes to the lack of willingness of the child. I believe children have to have the opportunity to grow by themselves, and they choose what they want to learn. But that is my question. Do you agree with the system of education we have, let's say, in Canada or in the United States or in Europe or anywhere else for that matter, the way it is?
Well, no, but I also have to admit that I really don't know. I don't have children. I'm not in touch with it. But judging from the lack of awareness around us in society, I think this education is sadly lacking. Yeah.
No, it's becoming. I mean, I have two small children, 10 and 12. And interestingly enough, my little boy basically was just non-compliant. So that basically got him into special ed. And then that was the best thing that ever happened to him, because the best teachers were in special ed. So in the end, he created an environment which was sort of ideal. The standard environment essentially has become increasingly sort of this syllabus has gotten longer and longer, more and more oppressive, and essentially it's just not achieving anything.
So if you are
It's just
not
achieving tension.
if you are not in compliance with the system,
Exactly.
you are being labeled as
Einstein, a good
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
He didn't do well at high school
Yeah.
and technical college. In fact, he was considered ineducable. Like he was so he couldn't.
well, even in the modern time, Steve Jobs was like that. Bill Gates, both of them are a dropout of the
I think
college.
anybody who would be on that level wouldn't be able to tolerate the present system.
No,
it's
it's
just
toxic,
it's
toxic,
literally
toxic.
intolerable. But then the question is, let's say,
Why we have it?
well, that's that basically just to make sure that we don't.
Well,
know
there's
anything.
where you
Yeah.
go higher and higher. Find out
Yeah.
who's dictating what the education system provides. Yeah.
And why? But let's say if we take a look at, let's say, the course of mastery, right? generally in speaking, the old school of mastery, it starts off with a very, very strictly regimented behavior. Like, for instance, even the calligraphy in China, but even in France, for instance. I remember when we were just in France for a few months with the children. One of the things that was different there is in the early years there, they are taught to write perfectly. There's absolute tremendous attention to that. Now, in the old system of mastery, the early stage is extremely autocratic, very precise, mechanical, repetitive, right? And then it opens up.
Yeah.
Now, is that the ideal system, or are there systems better than that?
I have to confess,
Yeah.
I don't know on what would be. I've never been in. I have taught some courses at college and university,
Yeah.
but not at the level of where it's really important
Yeah.
is young kids. Yes, I don't know.
Hey, the old
Yeah,
day, I
yeah.
remember when I was younger, I was watching, those days there was no YouTube or there was
Yeah.
no social media. And I was watching on the VHS a test they did on young children aged 2, 3.
Yeah.
And they threw them in a bunch of them in a room like this size of room and put bunch of the toys from toy cars to the Lego and all sort of things, and just observe them who naturally goes to what toy.
Yeah.
And the conclusion of that test was, if you let them, they pick up what they like to do. If you put enough choices in front of them. But then commentary was that, what if we didn't put all choices in front of them? Let's say if you put 10 different toys in front of them, and they could put 100. Would they pick what they picked in the first place? So comes back to your comment earlier.
You might put
It's
100
freedom of
toys, but it's the 101st toy that they really want, and it's not there.
It's not there. So it comes back to the freedom of choice that comes with us as we're born.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
Chris, how are we doing on time? 8 minutes. We have 8 minutes. Now, can I go to your list and just ask you one thing, because it was you mentioned that earlier. You said accident or happen. You discussed that. How sometimes, I am pretty sure every one of us, sometimes I am walking and something happens, something comes to my mind.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I'm not even consciously thinking of it. And that thought either encourages me to do something or stops me from doing something.
Yeah.
And most people usually discard that and they go with their own life, and then probably they get bad result, good result. That is different story. How we as a human, with this limited conscious we have, with not having all of the information from past, can be cultivate or grow this ability in our mind? Do you have a solution?
Yes, we can. And this, interestingly, this book, Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain, clearly points out how unskilled people can develop a skill. Like they have, for example, a young girl who could read, a blind girl, and she could read through her fingers. And even when they blindfolded her, she was blind,
without
but they
braille,
blindfolded
and
her again.
it wasn't
braille. She could distinguish colors, and she could read. And even they tried putting the newspaper under her. She sat on the newspaper, and she could read the newspaper. So,
Wow.
and yet they did that with a lot of children whom they trained over several months, and they found that there were a lot of kids could do much the same thing.
How did they explain
and
that?
and
It's
how
all in the book. They can't explain it, but they observe it.
How do we?
Yeah,
How do we?
yeah.
I don't want to go to that extent to be able to do something supernatural.
Yeah.
But how can I, as an individual, can develop a better sense of trusting my thoughts?
Well, that is supernatural.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we want to tap into our superconscious, our subconscious, superconscious, guardian angel. That is.
Is there a pathway?
There is a hotline There's a hotline
Which is?
to the higher dimensions. The Akashic records, for example.
No, okay, but would you say it's through the heart?
Well, we do have these chakras, or is it the highest? Is it the ajna center in the pineal gland? Is it important to develop our pineals? I have a machine that stimulates my pineal, and it puts energy in, and keeps the pineal and the pituitary active. Because
Is it good for hair? Is it good for hair growth as well? Or
is one of the side effects is that it grows hair?
Well,
All-
side effect. I think this is an advantage.
Nice side effect, eh?
we-
No, it's a Tesla coil, modified Tesla coil.
well, Tesla had a great head of hair. So.
Yeah, but he didn't have the God helmet that I have that puts the energy.
Oh, you have
into
a,
the
you
pineal.
call it
Well,
God
The
helmet?
God helmet. Well, that comes from Michael Persinger,
Yeah.
at Sudbury University, who would put magnetic fields into the brain, and people got divine experiences.
God helmet.
And they called it the God helmet.
So you put on this thing, and then you feel you get this like a
John,
rush, like a
John, let me ask you: do
Yes?
you believe in God?
Now I do, and I believe in God through science.
No, I understand that. What I'm saying is, I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you? Because when you talk about all these energies,
Mm-hmm.
do you believe God is those energies, or do you believe there is a God beyond those energies?
Well, we can't just separate God from non-God, right?
There's
no, I
nothing that is
understand that.
non-God.
We
but,
define
but is there
everything.
anything beyond energy that,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
as
yeah.
a unique one entity that you call
Yeah.
God?
The question you're asking
No,
really is there a
yeah.
higher a source of higher intelligence in the universe?
Yes.
A unified intelligence.
Unified, one entity.
Well, you can't say one; it's all one, really. But is there? In one of my talks before, I talked about the nucleus of the amoeba. Like the universe is like an amoeba,
Yes.
and the amoeba has a nucleus.
Yes.
And that is the core
Of the
in-
all the
intelligence.
yes.
And that is God. And inside that nucleus are the chromosomes. That too is God. And inside the chromosomes of the DNA, that too is God, because the energy,
So it's
the
a fractal.
information. And inside the DNA is the electrons and protons and neutrons. That too is God, because they carry, and they are white holes that bring in information from much higher dimensions.
then-
You know, because I tell
Okay, but-
people I am God, they don't believe me.
Well, no, you're
Well,
part of
we
the one,
are.
you're part of the one
We are.
exception.
It's another metaphor I like is the human body. Like
In your
there's a
case, they
brain
happen to be
and there's
right.
a big toe. We are like the big toe. We are part of that body. But if the big toe is missing, the body would be incomplete, right?
Of course.
So same with us. If we don't function our role as a big toe, then the body of all that is will be incomplete
So-
and dysfunctional.
So then God is not exactly a unified. It's unified intelligence, but it's not focused intelligence because it's just
No, it's
completely.
distributed
It's a bit like
intelligence.
pantheism was.
Like
It's
those
completely
you
diffuse.
Remember those
Yeah.
Star Trek old
Yeah.
one, the oldest one? In one episode, they had some sort of the fume that was going all over, and everything within that become one. So probably we are getting to the close to the end of the program. Do you have anything for the to
No,
end this
I
program?
think that's a good point to stop at. We have covered everything. We've covered all that is, right?
So before I leave,
the end of all
because I
programs,
don't
yeah.
want to live with the people with the cliffhanger. Do you believe in religion?
No, see, religion by definition is a binding and limiting and
restriction,
restraining
yeah.
Okay.
and restricting.
No, I just
it's-
want to you
No,
clarify
I
the
think that
difference
religion by
between-
definition is
Yeah,
toxic
yeah.
and pathological. Yeah.
John, you anything for the end of the show?
No, I couldn't top that.
I mean, who could?
Who could? Well, you might, but I wouldn't even try.
We agree, but
Yes.
who could top that? And we don't want to just put ourselves down neither.
We want to leave something for next week.
Thank you, folks, for being with us in this first show of the 2016. Again, you can go to our website at turnaroundduo.com and get copies or watch copies of the past shows, as well as some information, especially regarding some chapters of the John's book and the style of the helping to the organizations, and give you the general information. And if you need one of us or both of us, please, the contact information is there. Just drop us a line or two. We will be more than happy to respond to you. Thank you for being with us, and good night.
Right. Oh.